The ship appeared without warning on a Tuesday morning in March. It was massive, nearly the size of a small moon, and it hung in space just beyond Mars, like a silver tear frozen in the darkness. Every telescope on Earth turned toward it. Every satellite adjusted its cameras. Every government held emergency meetings while the people of the world looked up at the sky and wondered if everything was about to change. It was Captain Park. Doyen was eating breakfast when the alert came through. He was a tall man with tired eyes and a calm face that never showed fear, even when he felt it. He commanded the Earth Defense Fleet's flagship, a vessel called the Defiance. The ship had been built in secret over 15 years, using technology that governments had recovered from crashed objects they never told the public about. Nobody had expected to use it so soon. "The object is moving toward Earth," said his communications officer, a young woman named Ko Murray. Her voice was steady, but her hands shook slightly over her controls. "How long until it reaches us?" Park Doyen asked. "At current speed, 14 hours. Park Doyen nodded slowly. He finished his coffee, set down the cup, and stood. "Tell Earth Command we're moving to intercept, and open a channel to that ship. If they want to talk, we'll talk. But they do it on our terms." So the Defiance launched from its hidden dock on the dark side of the moon. It was joined by 12 other ships, smaller but fast. Together, they formed a wall of metal and fire between the alien vessel and the blue marble called Earth. The alien ship responded to their hails after 3 hours of silence. A face appeared on the screen, though. Calling it a face was generous. It was made of crystal, constantly shifting, with lights that pulsed where eyes might have been. It spoke in perfect English, which was somehow more unsettling than if it had spoken in some alien tongue. "Hey, I am Ambassador Velthus of the Galactic Council," the crystal being said. "We come in peace and friendship. We have watched your species for some time, and we believe you are ready to join the greater community of stars." Park Doyen studied the image for a long moment. "You've been watching us? For approximately 3 of your centuries? Yes. We observe all developing species. When they reach a certain level of advancement, we make contact and offer them membership in the Council. It is a great honor. Only 347 species have achieved it." "Ah!" "And what does membership involve?" Velthus seemed pleased by the question. "Many things. Access to faster-than-light travel. Medical technology that could extend your lifespans by centuries. Solutions to your environmental problems. Cultural exchange with hundreds of species. Trade opportunities beyond imagination. All we ask in return is cooperation and adherence to Council law." It sounded wonderful. It sounded too wonderful. On Earth, leaders gathered around screens, listening to the transmission. Most of them were ready to accept. How could they not? This was everything humanity had ever dreamed of. First contact. Proof they were not alone. And the aliens were friendly, offering gifts beyond measure. But Admiral Yoon Soo-jin was not most leaders. She was 63 years old. With gray hair, she refused to die, and a reputation for being the most stubborn person in any room she entered. She had fought in 3 wars, buried 2 husbands, and raised 4 children, who had all grown up to be soldiers themselves. She trusted nothing that came easy. "Ask them about the Volari," she said quietly to her aide. Her aide frowned. "The what, Admiral?" "I've been reading the signals we've intercepted over the years. Background chatter from deep space. There's a species mentioned several times called the Volari. They joined the Council about 2,000 years ago. Ask Velthos what happened to them." The question was relayed to the Defiance, and Park Doyen asked it. For the first time, Velthos hesitated. The lights in his crystal face flickered in a way that might have been confusion or annoyance. "The Volari are valued members of the Council. They serve important roles in our administrative systems." "Serve," Admiral Yoon repeated. "Watching from Earth, not participate. Serve." She made her decision. "Captain Park," she said through the secure channel. "I'm sending you new orders. Reject their offer." Park Doyen didn't question it. He had served under Admiral Yoon for 15 years, and she had never been wrong. Not once. He turned back to the screen where Velthus waited with patient confidence. Ambassador, I've been instructed to inform you that Earth declines your offer of membership. The silence that followed was absolute. I do not understand, Velthos said finally. No species has ever refused. There's a first time for everything. You have 12 hours to leave our solar system, Captain. Perhaps there has been a miscommunication. Let me explain the benefits more clearly. We can cure every disease your species has ever known. We'll cure them ourselves. Can give you faster than light travel. You could explore the galaxy, visit worlds you cannot imagine. We'll build our own ships. We'll find our own worlds. Velthus's crystal form pulsed with colors that might have meant anger or disbelief. This is unprecedented. The Council will not understand. They will think you are hostile. Then they can think what they want, Park Do-yoon replied. But they'll think it's somewhere else. Your 12 hours are now 11. The transmission ended. On the bridge of the Defiance, Ko Murray turned to her captain with wide eyes. Sir, did we just tell an alien civilization to leave? We did. What if they don't go? Park Do-yoon looked out at the stars, at the massive alien ship hanging in the darkness, at the small fleet of human vessels that stood between it and their home. Then we make them go. 11 hours later, the Council ship departed. It left slowly, almost reluctantly, as if it couldn't quite believe what had happened. But before it entered, whatever dimension it used for faster-than-light travel, Velthus sent one final message. You've made a mistake, humans. The Council does not forget rejection. We will return, and when we do, you will understand the cost of your pride. Admiral Yoon Soo-jin read the message and smiled grimly. Let them come, she said. We'll be ready. 6 months passed after the first contact. Earth changed in ways both visible and invisible. Governments that had spent decades fighting each other suddenly found reasons to cooperate. Factories that once built cars now built spacecraft. Universities that had studied theoretical physics began testing theories that everyone had thought impossible. Fear was a powerful motivator, but so was pride. Humanity had looked at the stars and said no. Now they had to prove they could survive that choice. Director Kong Ji-woo led the effort to understand what they had rejected. She was 41 years old, small and soft-spoken, with a mind that worked faster than any computer. Before the aliens came, she had been a professor of linguistics and cryptography. Now she commanded a team of 3,000 people whose only job was to listen to the galaxy and learn its secrets, they called themselves the listeners. The Council has been broadcasting. For at least 10,000 years, she explained to the unified Earth Command during one of their weekly meetings. Most of it is encrypted, but not well. They never expected anyone to try to break their codes. They thought they were alone in their dominance. Admiral Yoon asked. Director Kang pulled up a holographic display. It showed a map of the galaxy with hundreds of dots representing different species. Some dots glowed bright, others were dim. A few were completely dark. The bright ones are full council members. The dim ones are what they call client species, and the dark ones. She paused. Those are species that no longer exist. Extinct? Eliminated. The Council doesn't tolerate disobedience. When a species refuses to cooperate, they don't destroy them immediately. That would look bad. Instead, they isolate them, cut off trade, spread propaganda. Wait until the species tears itself apart from internal conflict. Then, they move in to help the survivors. The room fell silent. General Lee Tai-ho asked quietly. He was a large man with a soldier's bearing and a father's eyes. He had 3 grandchildren on Earth. Everything he did for them in the last 1,000 years. 47 species completely destroyed. Dozens more reduced to servitude. The Valari that Admiral Yoon asked about? They were a proud people once. Warriors and poets. Now they clean council ships and process administrative paperwork. Their homeworld was stripped of resources 5 centuries ago. They have nowhere else to go. Admiral Yoon nodded slowly. So when they offered us friendship, they offered us chains, Director Kang finished. Comfortable chains, at first. but chains nonetheless. The council returned on a cold morning in September. This time they sent 47 ships, each one carrying ambassadors from different species. They emerged from faster-than-light travel near Jupiter and immediately broadcast messages of peace and generosity. Director Kong met them at the edge of the Kuiper Belt. The Third Fleet accompanied her. 25 ships that hadn't existed 6 months ago. They were smaller than the council vessels, but moved with a grace that made the alien observers uncomfortable. "We have come with gifts," announced the lead ambassador, a being that looked like a walking tree with silver leaves. "The council has considered your concerns and wishes to address them. We bring minerals rare in your solar system, star maps showing safe routes through dangerous space, genetic templates for crops that will end hunger on your world forever." Director Kong smiled politely. She had a pleasant face, the kind that made people underestimate her. She had been underestimated her entire life. She had learned to use it. "We have analyzed your gifts," she said calmly. "The minerals contain isotopes that would allow you to track any vessel we build using them. Your star maps are incomplete. They show safe routes, yes, but they conveniently leave out 3 habitable star systems within 50 light-years of Earth. And your crop templates have genetic markers that would make them dependent on chemical compounds only the Council manufactures." The tree ambassador rustled its leaves. In what might have been embarrassment, "Those are standard precautions. Surely you understand that trust must be built gradually." "We understand perfectly. We understand that 52 species accepted your gifts and now exist only to serve Council interests. We understand that your generosity always comes with conditions. We understand that you see us as children to be controlled, not equals to be respected. You have been misinformed. The Council values all its members equally. Then why are the Kuth forbidden from developing their own military? Why are the Mendratians not allowed to leave their home system without permission? Why do the client species pay 70% of their resources to the Council while receiving only the scraps in return?" The ambassador had no answer. "We have read your histories," Director Kang continued. "All of them. The official ones and the hidden ones. We know what you really are. And we decline your gifts, your friendship, and your counsel." She leaned forward slightly, and though she was small and soft-spoken, something in her eyes made the alien ambassadors step back. "You should also know that we've been busy these past 6 months. We've learned how to build faster-than-light engines. We've made contact with 3 species who left your council centuries ago and have been hiding ever since. And we've begun developing weapons that your sensors cannot detect or understand."
Ow.
The tree ambassador trembled. This is not possible. "You were a primitive species. You should not have advanced so quickly. You've watched us for 300 years and learned nothing about us. We fight. We adapt. We refuse to accept limits. You saw a primitive species because that's what you wanted to see. What we really are is something you've never encountered before." She turned her ship around, and the Third Fleet followed. "Tell your council that Earth is not interested in being a client, a servant, or a victim. If they want to deal with us, they can do so as equals. Otherwise, they can stay on their side of the galaxy and leave us alone."
The 47th.
Ships returned to Council space with a message that the High Arbiter did not want to. Here, the humans had said no. Again. And this time, they had proven they knew exactly what they were saying no to. The Galactic Council had ruled for 11,000 years. They had conquered or absorbed every species they encountered. They had crushed rebellions, silenced dissent, and shaped the galaxy according to their will. They had never been defied successfully until now, reports came flooding into Council headquarters from every corner of known space. Human ships had been spotted near the Thornax mining colonies, offering trade deals that undercut Council prices by half. Human hackers had infiltrated the propaganda networks that kept client species docile, placing approved messages with historical records of Council atrocities. Human agents had made contact with the hidden survivors of species thought long destroyed. Offering technology and hope, High Arbiter Thesseron called an emergency session. He was ancient beyond measure. a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline shell that had been forged in the heart of a dying star. He had led the council for 3,000 years and had never faced a crisis he could not resolve through patience, manipulation, or force. "These humans are a disease," declared Ambassador Krethix, an insectoid being whose species controlled most of the council's military. "They must be eliminated before they infect other species with their ideas." "Elimination is expensive," countered Trade Minister Yelavan, whose slug-like body oozed across his chair. "The last species we eliminated cost us 3 centuries of resources. Perhaps we should find another way." "There is no other way," Thesarin said, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "I have studied these humans. They do not respond to bribes or threats or manipulation. They are immune to the tools we have used for millennia. They must be shown that resistance is futile. They must be broken." The vote was unanimous. For the first time in 4,000 years, the council authorized a full military response. Against a single species, 3,000 warships gathered at the edge of human space. They came from every corner of the galaxy, representing the combined might of the most powerful civilizations in existence. They were armed with weapons that could crack planets and shields that could withstand the heat of stars. They were crewed by beings who had never known defeat. They were terrifying. General Li Taiho watched them arrive from the bridge of the orbital station. Horizon's edge. The station hung above. Earth like a guardian angel, bristling with weapons and sensors. Around it floated the human fleet, now grown to 200 ships. They were outnumbered 15-1. "Sir, the enemy fleet is in position," reported Lieutenant Choi Yeren, a young officer whose calm voice betrayed no fear. "They're requesting communication. Open a channel." The face of High Arbiter Thesaron appeared on the screen. He was beautiful in a terrible way, light and crystal and ancient power. When he spoke, reality itself seemed to bend around his words. "General Li Taiho, I am High Arbiter Thesaron of the Galactic Council. I speak for 347 species and 11,000 years of civilization. You will listen and you will obey." General Li said nothing. He simply waited. "Your species has shown remarkable defiance. In other circumstances, we might admire it. But defiance cannot be tolerated. The order of the galaxy depends on obedience. You will surrender unconditionally. You will submit to council authority. You will accept our laws, our culture, and our guidance. Your military will be disbanded. Your leadership will be replaced. Your history will be rewritten to remove the shame of your rebellion. And if we refuse, then you will be destroyed. Not conquered. Not subjugated, destroyed. Every human, on every world, every station, every ship, will be eliminated. Your planet will be sterilized. Your name will be erased from history. It will be as if you never existed." Behind General Li, the command staff of Horizon's Edge watched in silence. On screens throughout the station, the people of Earth watched as well. They had all known this moment was coming. They had all prepared for it in their own ways. Some had prayed. Some had trained. Some had simply held their families close and waited. General Li looked at Thesaron's glowing face for a long moment. Then he turned and looked at his crew, at the faces on the screens, at the small blue planet hanging in the darkness below. "High Arbiter," he said finally, "I've been a soldier for 40 years. I've fought in wars that seemed hopeless. I've buried friends who deserved to live. I've made decisions that cost lives and decisions that saved them. And in all that time, I've learned one thing above all else." He turned back to the screen. "There are some things worth dying for. Freedom is one of them. Dignity is another. The right to look at our children and tell them that we refuse to kneel, no matter the cost." Thesaron's light flickered with what might have been anger. "You cannot win. We have the numbers. We have the technology. We have conquered 1,000 worlds, maybe. But you've never fought a species that genuinely doesn't care if it wins. We just care that you lose. We'll fight until the last human is dead, and we'll take as many of you with us as we can. And even if you destroy us completely, the galaxy will know that someone stood against you. That someone said no and meant it. That the mighty council could not force one small species to bow? He leaned forward, and his tired eyes blazed with a fire that Thesseron had never seen in 11,000 years of rule. "Bring your 3,000 ships! Bring your weapons, and your soldiers, and your ancient power. We're not surrendering. We're not submitting. And we're not afraid." He smiled grimly, respectfully. "High Arbiter, no." The transmission ended. The Siron stared at the blank screen for a long moment. Around him, his advisors waited in uncomfortable silence. "Begin the attack," he said quietly. "Show them what it means to defy the Council." The Battle of Sol had begun. The Council expected the battle to last hours. They had planned for days just to be thorough. The most pessimistic models predicted a week of mopping up scattered resistance before total victory. The Battle of Sol lasted 3 weeks. It began with chaos. The Council fleet advanced in perfect formation, confident in their overwhelming numbers. Their weapons charged, their shields hummed, and their commanders smiled with the certainty of victory. Then the first wave of human missiles struck. They came from everywhere. From the asteroid belt, from satellites that had seemed dead, from hidden bases on moons that the Council had never bothered to scan. They came in thousands, each one small enough to slip through sensor grids. Each one carrying warheads that should not have existed. 40 Council ships died in the first minute. Commander Bikuna led the 4th Assault Squadron into the heart of the enemy fleet. She was 32 years old, born in a small village by the sea, trained as a test pilot before the aliens came. She had volunteered for the most dangerous mission of the war because someone had to. She had never learned how to let someone else take the risk.
Ow!
"Stay in formation," she ordered her squadron. "We hit them fast, we hit them hard, and we don't stop moving." Her fighters were tiny compared to Council warships, but they moved like angry hornets. They dove between the massive vessels, targeting weak points that human intelligence had identified months ago. They used weapons that Council shields couldn't block because they worked on principles Council had never discovered. The big ships started to burn. "Commander, we've got a dreadnought on our tail," called Lieutenant Oh Sung-ho, her wingman. "It's locking weapons." Bikuna looked at her sensors. The dreadnought was massive, a mountain of metal and death. It was already firing, and her squadron was too slow to escape. "Everyone scatter," she ordered. "Get clear and continue the mission." "Commander, what are you?" "That's an order." She turned her fighter around and flew straight at the dreadnought. Her weapons were empty. Her shields were failing. But her engines still worked, and they were overloading them beyond every safety limit ever designed. The dreadnoughts. Captain saw her coming and couldn't believe it. One tiny fighter charging at a vessel 1,000 times its size. It was madness. It was humanity. Bikuna hit the reactor core at 300 times the speed of sound. The explosion lit up the entire battle, a new sun born and dying in an instant. When the light faded, the dreadnought was gone. Her sacrifice was the first of many. On the orbital station Horizon's Edge, Dr. Shin Min-ho worked frantically in a laboratory that shook with every explosion. He was a physicist, not a soldier. He had spent his life studying abstract concepts and writing papers that most people couldn't understand. He had never fired a weapon and never wanted to, but he had built one. "Is it ready?" Admiral Yoon asked, her face appearing on his screen. She was commanding the defense from the Defiance, currently engaged with 7 enemy cruisers. "I don't know if it will work," Shin Min-ho admitted. His hands shook as he made final adjustments to the device he had spent the last 6 months creating. "The math is right, but we've never tested it at this scale. If we don't have a choice. The outer defense line is collapsing. We need something to turn the tide." Shin Min-ho looked at his creation. It was small, barely larger than a basketball. It contained technology that bent the rules of physics in ways that still made his head hurt. Activating the gravitational lens, he said quietly. The device hummed. Space itself began to twist. 300 council ships were caught in the field. They tried to escape, but there was no escaping gravity when it stopped following normal rules. The ships compressed, folded, crushed together into a space smaller than a marble. 300 ships and their crews, reduced to nothing in an instant. The Council fleet recoiled in horror, but they kept coming. They landed troops on Earth, millions of soldiers from dozens of species, armed with weapons that could level cities. They expected terrified civilians, easy victims. A population begging for mercy. Captain Han Yunbi was waiting for them. She had been a high school teacher before the war. History and literature. She had never imagined becoming a soldier. But when the aliens came, she had looked at her students and known that she would do whatever it took to protect them. Now, she led the Soul Resistance Cell. 3,000 civilians armed with weapons they had learned to build from captured alien technology. They had turned every building into a fortress, every street into a trap. They had practiced for months, knowing this day would come. "They are entering the city from the east," reported her second-in-command. "A former accountant named Park Jung-soo. Let them come deep," Han Yunbi said. "Wait until they're committed. Then we close the trap." The council soldiers advanced confidently. The buildings around them seemed empty, abandoned. They had seen this before on other worlds, populations fleeing in terror. Leaving their cities to be taken without a fight, they realized their mistake when the PHEs went. The first explosions started. The buildings weren't empty. The people hadn't fled. They were waiting, and they had learned to fight like demons. The Battle of Seoul lasted for days. When it ended, 30,000 council soldiers were dead. The survivors retreated to their ships and refused to land again. But the turning point came at the end of the second week. When Admiral Yoon Soo-jin made her move, the council flagship was a monster of a vessel. Larger than the others, carrying High Arbiter, the Assyrian himself. It hung back from the main battle, directing forces, believing itself untouchable. Admiral Yoon led the first fleet in a charge directly at it. "Admiral, this is suicide," her executive officer protested. "We can't break through their escort." "We don't need to break through," she replied. "We just need to reach them." The first fleet fought like they had nothing to lose, because they didn't. Ship after ship fell, but the survivors kept pushing forward. They used every weapon, every trick. Every ounce of courage they possessed, the Defiance reached the flagship with her engines failing and her weapons empty. "Admiral." Yoon opened one last transmission to Fisarin. "You wanted to know why we reject your diplomacy? Because we looked at your galactic community and saw nothing but chains? We'd rather die free than live as your pets," she smiled. "We're not dying." Defiance rammed the flagship at full speed. Both ships exploded. And then, emerging from the debris in a battered escape pod, Admiral Yoon Soo-jin's voice crackled across all frequencies. "Next time, send more ships." The council fleet retreated on the 22nd day. They had come with 3,000 ships. Less than 800 returned home. They had expected an easy victory and received the worst defeat in their 11,000-year history. High Arbiter Thesseron survived. Though barely. His flagship was destroyed, his escort was shattered, and his reputation was ruined. He returned to council space in a borrowed cruiser, facing questions that had never been asked before. How had this happened? How had a primitive species discovered barely a year ago defeated the greatest military force in the galaxy? He had no answers. None that he was willing to give. The galaxy watched and wondered. The official council news networks tried to spin the defeat as a strategic withdrawal, temporary setback, a misunderstanding. But the truth spread anyway, carried by whispers and hidden messages and the simple, undeniable fact that the humans were still alive. They had said no. They had fought. They had won. Everything changed after that. The Volari were the first to rise. They had served the council for 2,000 years, cleaning ships and processing paperwork, their warrior heritage forgotten, except in secret songs sung in hidden places. When news of the human victory reached them, something woke up. Something that had been sleeping for centuries. They remembered who they had been. A single Volari maintenance worker named Voroth walked onto the bridge of the council administrative station where he had worked for 40 years. He looked at the crystalline beings who had commanded his species for generations. and he spoke 3 words in a language they had forbidden his people from using. "We are free." The revolt on that station lasted only hours, but it inspired others. The Kuth, forbidden from having a military, suddenly revealed weapons they had been building in secret for decades. The Mendrasians, trapped in their home system, used stolen council technology to break through the blockade that had imprisoned them for centuries. Within 3 months, 17 species had officially left the council. 40 more were in open rebellion. The client worlds burned with uprisings that no amount of propaganda could suppress, and everywhere there were humans. They came not as conquerors but as allies. They shared technology without strings attached. They offered help without demanding payment. They fought alongside rebels who had never known what it meant to have someone fight for them, instead of against them. Admiral Yoon Soo-jin, recovered from her injuries but walking with a new limp, became the face of the human support effort. She traveled to 12 worlds in the first year alone, meeting with resistance leaders, planning strategies, offering the one thing the Council had never given anyone: respect. "We know what it's like to be underestimated," she told the survivors of the Kuth Uprising after their first major victory. "We know what it's like to be told you're not good enough, not advanced enough, not worthy of freedom. And we know that it's all lies. Every species has the right to determine its own future. Every species has the strength to fight for what matters. The Council just made you forget that." The Kuth leader, an elderly female whose scars told the story of decades of quiet resistance, looked at the Admiral with eyes that glistened. "We thought we were alone," she said. "For so long we thought we were the only ones who remembered what we had lost. We were never alone. You just hadn't met us yet." 1 year after the Battle of Seoul, a new station was built in orbit around Earth. They called it Horizon's Edge, the same name as the station that had stood against the Council fleet. It was larger now, designed not for war, but for peace. It had rooms for diplomats, halls for conferences, and docking bays for ships from every species that had joined what the galaxy was beginning to call the Free Alliance. President Moon Jun stood before the gathered representatives. She was 55 years old, a former diplomat who had spent her career building bridges between nations that hated each other. Now she was building bridges between worlds. "We were asked why we rejected the Council's diplomacy," she said. Her voice carried across the station, across Earth, across a galaxy that was finally learning to hope. "The truth is, we didn't reject diplomacy. We rejected subjugation, dressed as diplomacy. We rejected false friendship that demanded our souls as payment. We rejected a galaxy where freedom was a privilege granted by the powerful, rather than a right inherent to all." She looked at the faces before her. Valari warriors standing proud for the first time in millennia. Kuth soldiers who had never been allowed to be soldiers. Mendrosians who had never seen the stars before this year. Humans who had fought and bled and refused to bow. Today, we offer true diplomacy. Not as masters, not as supplicants, but as equals. We will not give you gifts with strings attached. We will not demand your loyalty. We will not tell you how to live, or what to believe, or who to become. We only ask that you stand with us as we build something new, something the galaxy has never seen before. She paused, letting the words settle. A community of free peoples, working together because they choose to, helping each other because it's right, standing against tyranny not because they must, but because they can. The applause started slowly, then grew until it shook the station walls. Species that had been enemies for centuries embraced. Soldiers who had thought they would die as slaves wept with joy. Children who had been born into bondage looked at the future and saw possibility instead of chains. Far away, in what remained of Council space, High Arbiter Thezeron watched the broadcast from his diminished throne. His empire was crumbling. His allies were abandoning him. His future was uncertain for the first time in 3,000 years. He did not understand. He could not understand. The Council had offered humanity everything, and they had refused. They had chosen struggle over comfort, uncertainty over security, the hard path over the easy one. Why? He would never know. He was too old to set in his ways, Too convinced of his own rightness, he had built a galaxy based on control and manipulation and fear. And it had worked for 11,000 years, but fear only worked until someone refused to be afraid. In the Great Hall of Horizon's Edge, Admiral Yoon Soo-jin stood beside President Moon watching the celebration. Her old bones ached, and she was tired in ways that rest could not cure. But she was smiling. "Do you think it will last?" the president asked quietly. "Nothing lasts forever," the admiral replied. "But some things are worth building anyway. Some things are worth fighting for. And some things once born can never truly die." She looked out at the stars, at the galaxy that was changing, at the future that humanity had chosen. "We rejected their diplomacy because it was never really diplomacy at all. It was a collar with a pretty bow. Today we offer something different. Something honest. Something real." She turned back to the celebration, to the species who had found each other in the darkness, to the alliance that was growing stronger every day. "And that," she said softly, "is worth everything."